Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another summer series governance update from VLGA Connect. First off, an apology on behalf of my colleague. We tried to do a governance update last week, but when I arrived at the studio, all I could see was the beachfront there and a little dot. I think you were having a swim, were you, Steve? You weren't taking your governance duties seriously that day or something?
Yeah, I headed around the point to Oberon Bay, Chris, so I just wasn't quite at the spot where I could plug into the nearest gum tree.
Quite seriously, we've a very relaxed approach to this during the summer series. We just decided we didn't have much to talk about, but we're back this week with lots to talk about. Starting off with a very special guest joining us at the end of each month. Again, this year will be Hannah Duncan-Jones from Local Government Victoria, and I think I hear her footsteps approaching now. And here's Hannah Duncan-Jones now. Hi, Hannah, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Great to be back here in 2021. Here we are in a whole new year of adventure and excitement.
Indeed. That's a very upbeat way of looking at what's to come. It's nice to hear. We check in with you regularly on the implementation of the Local Government Act 2020. I think we've got to stop putting new in front of that now because we're going up towards 12 months, aren't we? And there's a couple of important milestones just ahead of us.
There certainly is some really important ones. And the first one is the Code of Conduct for councillors, and for the first time incorporating those mandatory standards of conduct in that Code of Conduct, and councils need to have adopted that by the 24th of February. So very, very close to the requirement in relation to that. And it's really important to understand that until that Code of Conduct is adopted, that the previous Code of Conduct applies. And so the new measures in relation to the standards come into effect upon the adoption of the Code of Conduct by the new council, and that means arbitration would be undertaken in relation to those new standards from that time forward. But until it's adopted, the existing Code of Conduct applies, and so the existing measures in relation to behaviours and so on apply.
Good points, of course. Now, Steve is doing some Code of Conduct training with various councils around the state on behalf of the VLGA. What sorts of issues or questions are arising as they consider the requirements, Steve?
Yeah, Chris, thanks for that. And I think Hannah's touched on a really important point. And as you said, we're doing some work with justicial lawyers, with a few councils on Code of Conduct. One of the areas we're really focusing on is what's the point from which internal or informal resolution moves to that more formal arbitration process, and getting discussion happening amongst the councils and commitment to resolve internally, because we know that once you move to that arbitration and more formal process, it's going to be pretty difficult to restore relationships. So really seeing any Code of Conduct as a work in progress, I suppose, Chris and Hannah.
So that's the 24th of February, correct me if I'm wrong, that they are due. And we've also got the community engagement policy requirements by the 1st of March, Hannah?
That's right, absolutely. So certainly seeing that there's lots of activity across the sector in relation to engagement on the community engagement policy, and seeing news snippets in relation to that, and around a whole range of councils and what they're doing, and that's great to see. So it's certainly a conversation that's active across the state, which is essentially the intention of this, is to make it a policy that drives the community in terms of their engagement with council, and council's promises around that engagement, and particularly deliberative engagement, are really, really clear. So community know how they can engage with council, and council can be very clear about the processes they take, whether it's in relation to the vision or something that's not quite so major. The promise is made, the promise is kept, and once those policies are adopted, that it'll be really good to see a whole range of different kinds of engagement occurring across the state, and share those learnings through our implementation process.
Hannah, both of these documents, the Code and the Community Engagement Policy, are really important ones for councillors to be engaged in, to have buy-in. And we know they haven't been in office this time around for very long. A big induction program, as Steve's been involved in rolling out with various councils. What sort of a sense are you getting of councils' preparedness to adopt these important documents so soon in their term?
So look, we're certainly following up around councils making phone calls and so on. It's a little early to see what's in the agenda in relation to these matters as yet. But it certainly seems that there is good engagement when you look on the socials, when you make those phone calls, that people are making good progress. And that they're looking at it in relation to their community, what can be delivered in their community, and making a commitment to it. So we're really quite pleased with the progress that's being made.
Steve, I know you talk to a lot of governance people. Are you getting the sense that these tasks are well in hand?
It's the old story, Chris. I think that well in hand from a compliance point, yes. I think there's also a general awareness, though, that we're all on trainer wheels. In terms of the move to a principles-based act. And so in a sense, compliance shouldn't be difficult, but there's roles and responsibilities. That move for officers and councillors to engagement away from doing it with rather than for the community. That's an ongoing story, I think, and I imagine Hannah's hearing similar themes.
Steve, you've picked up on some conversations around the new register of interest requirements, and I know, Hannah, this is a question without notice, so I don't particularly expect you to have to weigh in on this, but what are you hearing, Steve, about, I guess, some of the definitions in the form that are new to people?
I think the one in terms of the definitions that there might be some queries around is, Chris, what constitutes an unincorporated association? So if you go through the regulations, and if someone's a board member of an incorporated association or involved with a trust or been employed or a contractor, that's pretty clear. But this notion of an unincorporated association, so an informal group of people, that might be an action group. Do they have a bank account? Do they have a constitution? What's the point at which declaration is actually required, and what actually comprises an unincorporated association is, exercising a few minds. And one of the real risks, I suppose, is if the question's not asked and someone by omission missing that out, because it's a pretty straightforward requirement that if someone is in that leadership or an office bearer of an unincorporated association, that it should be declared.
Just remind me on the timelines of that. Are they not yet due or very close to being due?
It was 6 monthly. So without going into detail, there was the initial return immediately post the election, and then a 6 monthly return after that. Yes. Again, being mindful of that old trap that has carried over from the 89 Act, that it's about the interests during the declaration period, not just as at that date, is important too.
Are you hearing much about that, Hannah, getting any inquiries in your office about registers?
Not at this stage, but certainly when the information was first released, there was a bit of traffic, but not a lot since, is my understanding.
Hannah, you've been dealing with some queries about the implementation of Section 102, I think it is, of the Act in relation to financial policies.
Absolutely. So, it's as people read and get deeper into the Act, they find more things. And Section 102 talks about council preparing and adopting financial policies that give effect to the financial management principles. And it's been a bit of a question about whether that's something that would be regulated, and it's certainly not our intention to regulate in the spirit of a principles-based Act in relation to this matter. But some of the things that councils might want to have a policy position around treasury management, borrowings and investment, revenue and debt collection, procurement and delegations, reserve management, budget management, performance reporting, corporate card management, pricing policy, those sorts of things. And having a look in relation to all of the work they're putting together for their budget, their revenue and rating plan, those sorts of things, procurement as it comes up, what is going to fall out that they might want to provide some guidance around how they're going to do those things, so that they've got a really good, standard operating procedure and policy supported by policy for their council. So
they won't be regulated as such. There won't be regulations to sit above that. But will they be subject to community engagement practices, or is that dependent on the policy that they're about to adopt?
Look, it will be absolutely dependent on the policy that they're about to adopt. Much of this will sit quite in the procedural level in terms of policy to guide procedure, rather than at the operational level, rather than necessarily at that community level.
Great, thanks, Hannah. What else is on your radar before we let you go in terms of implementing the 2020 Act?
So look, we're certainly doing a bit of work around our approach this year. We know it's a big year. We really want to get people's feedback about anything that we can do to enhance or improve our approach in the year ahead. We want to have a real focus on continuous improvement and how we can come back and help people improve processes that they've already put in place or policies that they've already put in place. So we'll be having a conversation about that with the Project Control Board next week. And our first LGV Connects is going to be on the 18th of February. So we'll be sending out registration details for that, and we look forward to seeing a great audience there again to start off the new year.
Thank you, Hannah. It's always a pleasure to have you on the governance update. And if you are happy to, we'll continue to see you back here each month.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Great to see you.
Steve, always great to hear from Hannah, and looking forward to seeing her again in a few weeks' time. Now, before we go, it's going to be a busy time for the VLGA in the next few weeks. Your AGM is fast approaching.
True, Chris. We've posted directly to members, member councils, and on our website the fact that the AGM will be held on the 25th of February at 4:30. And in fact, by way of quirky things, it's the 25th of February, 2021, but it's the 2020 AGM because Consumer Affairs Victoria have given associations an additional 6 months to conduct their AGM because of the COVID issues. So like many others, we took the advantage of the opportunity just to make sure that we had the administration in place.
Indeed. And if you refer to the latest edition of the newsroom, we talk in a bit more detail about some of the things that are coming up on that agenda for the AGM.
A couple of points to make on the AGM, Chris. And one is the fact, purely from self-interest, we need to get a quorum so that we don't have to do it again. But the second thing is for any councillor at a member council, please come along, because if the CEO's report and the President's report will give a great overview of the work that the VLGA is doing, and in particular in this last 12 months, which has been an interesting year to say the least, we've been pretty active, and it will give member councils the opportunity to leverage as much as possible off their membership by knowing as far as possible what's going on. So good reason to come along.
And it is virtual, so come along virtually, correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
Indeed.
When you register, you get a Zoom link.
And Steve, I know you're working really hard on the program for the Fast Track Leadership Day, which is coming up in early March, and very pleased to hear that you've got the local government minister, Sean Lean, lined up to open that and I think participate in some discussion with the audience.
That's true. The minister's agreed to do that, Chris, and we're very excited about that. Friday, the 5th of March, Chris, all day. Really happy with the panel for Fast Track. It's traditionally been the mayoral Fast Track. It's mayor and councillor Fast Track, but absolutely with a focus on leadership. So we'll be starting the day talking about leadership, the role of the mayor in leadership, right through from the strategic end to the leading the councillor group. We'll talk about code of conduct, strangely enough, and going beyond the compliance element and how useful the code of conduct, how the code of conduct can be used usefully to build great relationships inside the organisation. And then the final panel will be the next 290 days. So it's not just enough to have those internal processes, but what are we going to do with them in the context of community engagement, development of all the strategic work that the councils are doing, and moving really beyond this implementation phase of the Act in the community interest. And we'll be finishing the day, really excited about this, with performance by Playback Theatre. So whatever people have, participants have gleaned from the day, we can throw back at Playback Theatre and see in a new and different way to hopefully entertain and inform.
Aha, there's another piece of the puzzle. Catherine was a bit coy on Newsroom. You've given us a little bit more, and I dare say over the next few weeks we'll tease out a bit more detail on what you have in store.
I hope I haven't released anything highly top secret and confidential, Chris.
Steve, before you go, I just want to give a plug to an interview that I've recorded for VLGA Connect Summer Series with Andrew Greaves, the Auditor General in Victoria, and Kristen Hilton, the Commissioner for Equal Opportunity and Human Rights. It's about the sexual harassment survey that was conducted for local government last year, but the conversation covers some broad areas, including governance responsibilities of councillors in particular. I think you'll find it interesting. I hope the viewership will as well.
Chris, I'll be diving into that because I think addressing the issues in that report goes a long way to managing culture in organisations, and that is the biggest game in town. So, yeah, really looking forward to it.
Now, when can we expect to see you back attired appropriately for the very serious audience that we have out there in local government land?
Well,
Steve?
Chris, I made a strategic decision that I wasn't going to conform with corporate norms during the summer series, and hence you get the Hawaiian shirt. I think next week we'll be suited up.
Excellent. All right. We'll might hold you to that. Thank you, Stephen. Good to chat as always. Have a great week, and we'll see you on another governance update very soon.